Hi, I'm Dr. Neil Cox from University of Reading. This is my third and final chat about narration in Wuthering Heights. If this is the first video you've seen, go back and watch the other ones. What I'm saying now will make a lot more sense. What we saw in the first two videos was a very short bit of Wuthering Heights, what we were looking at, where Lockwood is talking about Nellie Dean as a narrator and saying that she's like a cat licking the ear of its kitten. What can we say about that? Well, what we have is a text with multiple narrators. And those multiple narrators are themselves offering theories of narration and offering theories of what it means for narration to be complete or what it means for narration to be partial. And I think it's really important to, that was only a really kind of cursory go at it in the last two videos, but it's really important, I think, to return to the actual text and read these debates, because the idea of part and whole and multiplicity and the difference of narrators and the class difference of narrators is something that has really exercised the greatest critics of this great novel. And it can help us kind of to get a handle on what might be at stake in certain critical debates. Jan B. Gordon, the fantastic critic of the Brontes, she regards Wuthering Heights as having what she calls a kind of a gothic structure. It's a tale that's all about a framing. It's that box narration. One narrator introduces another. Each narrator is framing the story that's coming next. And she sees this also as, for example, the structure of Tenant Waffle Hall, as well as many other Gothic texts. It's Gothic, I guess, because it's excessive, but also because it kind of worries ideas of clear origins. It's against the idea of a central, rational storyteller or authority that can get everything kind of together. And it's also about a play of insides and outsides, and that's something maybe I could do on a different video, but that's also something that's very important, I think, to kind of Gothic kind of structures. This is how another great critic, Miller, and I'll put the quote up, understands this structure. This is what he says, and what he says is complex, but we'll be able to work it through. The time shifts, the multiplication of narrators and narrators within narrators, the double plot, the effacement of the author, and the absence of any trustworthy and knowing narrator who clearly speaks for the author are used strategically in Wuthering Heights, however, to frustrate the expectations of a reader such as Lockwood. They are used to introduce such a reader step by step by way of gradual unveiling room by room into the penetralium of her strange vision of life. This formulation sounds too much as though they were at the inside of the inside, the final revelation of a presence. There is the invitation to believe this revelation will occur, but however far inside the reader gets, he finds not presence, but only more enigmatic signs, enticing promises of a revelation which never occurs. Really simply, I think, what Miller's saying here is that because we've got multiple narration and kind of nested narration, you're kind of drawn in. And it seems almost like you're entering a house, with each new narrator revealing something new. But you never get to the heart of the house. There is no heart of the house. What you get instead is this kind of movement of displacement. It's like a Shaggy Dog story, you know. The truth is never revealed. You just continue opening doors. And this is a kind of interesting take on the novel when we think about what Lockwood's kind of desire is. Lockwood's desire is to have a whole story. You know, it's almost like Othello's round unvarnished tale, isn't it? You know, something that's absolutely perfect and whole without any bits missing. Miller sees this actually as a novel that is fundamentally lacking in a good way at its centre. There is no final answer to the text. It's an enigma, yeah, and its meaning is simply the shift from one thing to another. Jambi Gordon has got a very different take on the same structure. She says, in contradistinction to the thrust of most post-structuralist thought, the frame discourse that encloses more free-floating, incomplete or discontinuous discourse in Gothic structures is not the formal counterpoint of the radical thematics of the mode, but rather serves to refrain and repress. Again, it's complicated language, but I think what Gordon is saying here is actually, instead of the idea of each narrator following the other and it really sort of going nowhere, just sort of a displaced narration, actually the framing narratives hold something at its centre. They repress and they restrain. That these really are walls within which something can therefore be held. The framing narrative is about creating the possibility of something actually being there at the centre. And I think one of the things we can think about here is the extent to which this is a text that is about the restraint of women. There is a fantastic article that I strongly recommend, a kind of a historicising article by Judith Pike called "My Name Was Isabella Linton," which really does so much work in allowing us, I think, to understand how central and important Isabella, such a neglected character, is for this story. I think what Gordon's reading allows us to do is not only see kind of Gothic as potentially quite a reactionary, enclosing kind of form, rather than kind of like fun and wild, but also to think about incarceration, holding, restraining within this novel. What is restrained so often in terms of narrative, but also in terms of legality, is women. There is something deeply, deeply wrong about what happens in this novel, in terms of Heathcliff's manipulation of the law, in terms of Isabella. But also it makes us think, I think, of Lockwood as maybe not simply someone on the outside of the novel, so just an irritating peripheral character, but actually as a male repressive voice, repressing what is inside. Okay, saying all that, interestingly enough, when I wrote on this, I took exactly the opposite point of view from Jambi Gordon when I wrote about her work. But one of the joys of doing literary study is encountering opinions that are counter to one's own and just being in awe at their brilliance.